The president wins round one. A federal court clears Trump to send National Guard troops into Portland. Plus, a tragedy stopped in its tracks. A man accused of planning a mass shooting at Atlanta's airport and the family who spoke up in time. And hard hats at the White House. Crews tear into the East Wing, the big promise and the big controversy.
The stories that matter, clear and credible, from across the country to around the world. These are your unbiased updates from Straight Arrow News.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kaylee Carey, and this morning for Craig Negrelli. This morning, the battle over troops in Portland has taken a turn. A federal appeals court has cleared President Trump to deploy the National Guard, overturning a judge who blocked it earlier this month. The White House argues the move is needed to protect federal facilities, especially an ICE building that's been the site of protests for months. But Oregon officials say those demonstrations have mostly calmed down and accuse the president of manufacturing a crisis to justify military action. The two-judge majority, both Trump appointees, said the president acted within his authority under federal law, while a third judge, a Clinton appointee, called the ruling absurd, saying it accepts a false picture of Portland as a war zone. Oregon's attorney general says the decision sets a dangerous precedent, giving the president power to put troops on city streets with little oversight. The administration praised the court's ruling. The case now appears headed for the Supreme Court. And in a related case, the Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to lift a lower court order blocking troops from entering Chicago. But Illinois and city officials call that request a mischaracterization of the facts, saying local police have handled small protests without issue. They're urging the justices to keep the block in place, warning that deploying the Guard would disrupt the constitutional balance between state and federal power. The government shutdown is now 3 weeks old, and there's still no end in sight. For the 11th time, the Senate failed Monday to advance a short-term spending bill, one that would reopen the government while lawmakers negotiate a broader deal. Today, Senate Republicans head to the White House, where President Trump is expected to thank them for holding the line as they continue to reject Democrats' demands. Meanwhile, Majority Leader John Thune plans to introduce a separate bill this week, one that would guarantee pay for federal workers and military personnel still on the job during the funding freeze. That plan will need Democratic support, the same support Republicans failed to get last week on a similar defense measure. Police say a tragedy was averted in Atlanta after the arrest of a man accused of planning a shooting at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Officers say 49-year-old Billy Cagle's own family called for help after he went live on social media saying he was headed to the airport to shoot it up. Police found his truck parked outside the terminal, an AR-15 style rifle, and 27 rounds of ammo inside. They later found Cagle walking through the South Terminal, believed to be scouting the area before retrieving his weapon. Investigators say he's a convicted felon with a history of mental health issues and credit his family for speaking up before it was too late.
We're here today briefing you on a success and not a tragedy, because a family saw something and said something. A family knew they had a family member in crisis, they knew they had access to firearms, and they were on social media. This is something we've seen across the country time and time again. Social media postings, people with an awareness, individuals with access to a firearm. But today, the family said something.
Cagle is now charged with making terroristic threats, attempted aggravated assault, and multiple firearms offenses. Former FBI Director James Comey is going on offense, filing two separate motions to toss out the federal charges brought against him by President Trump's Justice Department. One argues the case is pure retaliation, a personal vendetta by the president. The other claims the prosecutors who filed it was never legally appointed. Comey's team calls the indictment an egregious abuse of power, saying Trump targeted him for his public criticism. As part of the filings, Comey's lawyers submitted a 60-page collection of public statements by Trump and Comey, a paper trail they say shows a clear pattern of retaliation. Writing, quote, in response to Mr. Comey's protected speech, President Trump has resorted to personal attacks and calls to retaliate through punishment and imprisonment. The pattern of the president's statements and actions demonstrate a clear intent to subject Comey to official reprisal for his protected speech. Comey also argues that Lindsay Halligan, a former Trump lawyer named interim U.S. attorney, was defectively appointed, making the entire indictment invalid. She took over after her predecessor, Eric Siebert, was forced out under pressure to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James. Comey's filings even cite Trump's own classified documents case in Florida, where a judge dismissed charges over a similar appointment issue. Demo crews have moved in at the White House, tearing into part of the East Wing to make way for President Trump's long-promised ballroom. He's called it a ballroom for the country, but what's turning heads is where it's being built. Trump had promised the project wouldn't interfere with the existing White House, yet Monday, the Washington Post reports a backhoe was seen ripping through the East Wing, home to the First Lady's offices for decades. The $250 million expansion will add nearly 90,000 square feet, more than tripling the size of the East Room. The president thanked a room full of donors at the White House last week.
The ballroom for the White House is the thing that you people have really been very generous with. And we're going to build a room that's going to be able to hold literally the inauguration if we want. All of the glass on the sides is bulletproof.
The president says the new ballroom is fully funded by private donations from major U.S. companies. White House officials call it modernization, but critics call it the most drastic change to the People's House in a century. Finally, this morning, the World Series matchup is set, and it features a team that hasn't been there in more than 3 decades. The Toronto Blue Jays are heading back to the Fall Classic, their first trip since 1993, after a thrilling come-from-behind win over the Seattle Mariners. Toronto trailed 3-1 in the 7th, runners on second and third, when George Springer stepped up and launched a 3-run shot to left, putting the Jays on top for good. Final score, 4-3, and the celebration was on. Next up, Toronto takes on the Los Angeles Dodgers in the World Series, Game 1 Friday night at 8 Eastern. And before we head out, here's what we're tracking today. Starting in Houston, where the man accused of killing an 11-year-old boy who was playing ding-dong ditch faces a judge this morning. Then at 11, J.P. Morgan opens its new Manhattan headquarters, with Jamie Dimon cutting the ribbon. In Florida, Miami-Dade College's board meets for the first time since a judge temporarily blocked a land transfer tied to President Trump's proposed library. And later today, a showdown in Alabama over a proposal to pull books with transgender themes from public libraries. Wake up with your brain already caffeinated. Sign up for our Unbiased Updates newsletter. Go to san.com/newsletters. Those are your Unbiased Updates for this Tuesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. For all of us here at Straight Arrow News, I'm Kaylee Carey. Have a great day.